but I would like to thank Jason for coming today. Our speaker today is Jason Cahill. He is part of the public sector VC and startups teams from Arlington, Virginia, and focuses on driving adoption of clean tech startups within the public sector globally. Jason is coming most recently from the early stage venture capital space. Previously, he founded a tech company focused on transportation optimization. Prior to working for startups, Jason served in the public sector for 15 years as an Army Special Forces operator, then later as a consultant. Jason has advised multiple startups in the clean tech, ed tech, and deep tech domains on go-to-market strategy, fundraising, product development, and operations. Jason sits on an advisory board for several startups. He also teaches Hacking for Defense, a course that takes lean innovation methods and applies them to DoD-related problems at Columbia University. He has an MBA from Carnegie Mellon University and a BS in Information Systems Management from the University of Maryland. Jason and his wife, Christina, are proud parents of Theo 6 and Alice 4. So Jason, thanks for coming, and I'll let you get started.
Well, thanks. And yeah, the best sentence is the last sentence is the best. Proud dad of Theo and Alice. Well, thanks everyone for coming here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now, and you tell me. Oh, it would help if I hit the share screen button. Okay. Let's see. Now, are you seeing the screen?
We can see the screen, but it shows the next slide on the side and your slides at the bottom.
Let's do, I don't need presenter view. I've shown this a couple times. So let's just do, but let me just do regular. Let's see. We'll get there. I'll figure it out. There we go. Now you should be able to see the screen without any other stuff, correct?
I can just see you.
You just see me?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Today's lesson is on how to use Zoom.
You know, it's April Fool's Day, so it just fits the theme.
Can you see the screen now?
Yes, that's perfect.
All right, perfect. So thank you all for being here. As Allison said, I work for Amazon, and even before I get into the slides, just 30 seconds of context. What I hope to accomplish today is help reduce the fear, the anxiety, the stress that a lot of early stage founders have when I say you should build your solution for the government, for healthcare, for a regulated industry. And when I think of regulated industries, I'm thinking of things that maybe need to be HIPAA compliant, FedRAMP certified, FINRA certified. These are all acronyms. I'll go over a couple. I'm certainly not expecting you to have them memorized, nor do I. Essentially, if the data needs to be secured, oftentimes founders, myself included, thought that's the last place I really want to start my business because of the complexity, because of the risks of operation. So we're going to talk about how Amazon specifically has helped founders like yourself get beyond that. But at the beginning, I just want to talk about some of those challenges and what the frameworks are that can get beyond that. And as Allison said, I really want this to be interactive. One, because I was in your shoes. I went to Tepper. I founded my business while there. And I want you to take advantage of not only myself speaking today, but speakers who came before and after me. We love to do things like this. So, and I'm just going to move. I don't need to see myself. There we go. Cool. Perfect. Almost perfect. Even better. There we go. So traditionally, in a pre-cloud environment, if you were going to build software, you would literally buy servers. Then you would put your servers into some type of data center. One, this was quite expensive. Two, it took a large amount of IT operational awareness. So, traditionally you would raise a whole lot of money, and probably a half or more of that raise would go simply to the hardware infrastructure. Some of the challenges, of course, as it states here, lack of visibility. If you put your servers in some third-party data center, you don't know who's coming and going there, and it's really hard, as that icon kind of alludes to. It's hard to automate a lot of that physical, what we would call rack and stack, where you're physically putting a server in a rack, you're patching the cables on the back. And so, one, you had to be very deliberate about what industries you wanted to serve, because you're putting a physical box in the rack. And two, it was just simply more costly. Oops, there we go. And so, as I like to say, in the land before, it was move fast or stay secure. And now, because of some things we're going to talk about in greater depth in a minute, excuse me, it's move fast and stay secure. And some of the most sensitive workloads do run on AWS. FINRA is the Financial Investment Network Regulatory Authority, Financial Industry Regulatory Authority. ZocDoc is a patient platform that is very HIPAA compliant and has a very large amount of personal data. And then Vodafone is an Italian phone company. And so all three of these have very sensitive data, but they're able to leverage systems on AWS to get beyond this. So part of this advantage of going on a cloud, one, first and foremost, you're inheriting the global security and compliance controls. What we say is security in the cloud and security of the cloud. So what that means is there are parts of the cloud infrastructure that simply exist by you being an Amazon customer. Things like physical security in the data center, things like that, access controls, things like the patching of servers. You inherit all of that simply by being. And you're able to scale much faster because of it, with increased visibility. And we've already gone through a lot of those accreditation standards and protocol systems, so that you can simply get to, when I was building a transportation startup, I didn't have to think about, there's a regulatory body for any industry, and there's one called the Federal Motor Carrier Administration. It's not on the test, not on a quiz, not even on the slides, but that was the governing body for all things transportation. By building my startup, Cloud First, I didn't have to think of the compliance regimes, making sure that what we were building was compliant. It simply was by being on the platform. And here's just sort of an eye chart on a good number of the security and compliance controls. This is not exhaustive, and this list grows every day. But some of the ones that I'll highlight on here, there's FedRAMP. And FedRAMP, essentially, if you want to do business with the federal government, that is their on-ramp. And another one is FIPS compliant. Excuse me. If you're doing anything really with credit card or fintech, PCI is a big one. We've already gotten these compliance and control standards, such that if you hypothetically were building a medical service providing startup where you needed to take a lot of personal information, there are certainly controls all of the patient record data you would be in charge of, but the underlying physical infrastructure is already compliant. So that's just something you wouldn't have to worry about. Because again, in a pre-cloud environment, you would have to demonstrate through rather exhaustive compliance guides what the technical footprint was and how you would secure it. And so again, you can control where your data is stored, who has access to it, and you can really integrate your solutions to support existing workflows. I'm skipping through these slides a little bit because I actually have two decks. This is the high-level deck that talks about security and privacy. And then I want to go a lot deeper into how you can leverage what we call compliance as code. We talk about infrastructure as a service. And really, if you think of compliance as a service, it does all the heavy lifting. But before we get there, a couple more slides on how you can reduce that risk with integrated security. We have a number of API and security tools. We have a number of service offerings that directly address threat response and remediation and continuous monitoring and protections. Here's more of a service level chart that explains some of those from left to right, going everything from identity and access management all the way through compliance. Again, you can get a copy of this deck afterwards. I'll make sure that Allison has a copy. So we don't need to really go deep into each of these services. Just know that there is a good depth of tools available across these functional areas of concern that you might have. The other thing I'd like to highlight is oftentimes, and certainly when I was in my own startup journey, it sometimes can feel like you against the world, where maybe you're not thinking about who you could partner with because you think you just need to get your solution out to market. There are a number of partners that companies that we partner with that provide these solutions. Because we're providing the plumbing, if you will, companies that you've probably heard of, like F5, Barracuda, Cisco, McAfee, Splunk, and certainly ones that you might not have heard of. They provide third-party solutions that we partner with to help you achieve your goals across these various domains. Because the end game really is to get you delivering value to customers faster. I'm sure for those of you who have taken Dave Mawhinney's classes, or really any of the entrepreneurship classes, being able to iterate quickly, test hypotheses, figure out what works, and more importantly, what doesn't, quickly is really the name of the game. And so being able to leverage existing solutions, I think, really advances the ball faster. These are more of the consulting partners out there. I left this slide in. Usually the consultants are a little further down the road, but I'll give one use case in a minute of how one, here we go, security in the cloud. In the cloud, you're responsible by the services that you're using. So if you're using a storage service, for example, where in that storage service you had a bunch of customer records, it's ultimately your job as founder to ensure that you have access controls in place. That would be, making sure you have secure passwords, making sure that it's not 1, 2, 3, 4. Security of the cloud are things that we as AWS as a company are responsible for. That's the physical infrastructure. That's ensuring that as vulnerabilities arise in certain variants of code, that we are patching those effectively and managing the underlying infrastructure. So this sort of shows that traditional on-premise security model where you're responsible end-to-end for everything. Sorry, I hit the slide too soon. Now, in a cloud-based model, you're really responsible, depending on what services you're choosing. If you're doing a bare metal server where you're simply doing like an EC2 or a server instance, you would be responsible for the software up. If you're doing a managed service like AWS Lambda, you would literally be responsible for platform and up. So that's something to consider. How much of your time you want to spend on sort of server ops can really help inform what variants are the best for your solution. So digging in a bit deeper, within the financial industry, the FINRA organization, their responsibility is for looking for fraud, abuse, insider trading. The challenge they have is there are over 6 billion shares traded daily, which is, you know, a needle in a big stack of needles. They process 6 terabytes of data, 37 billion records on an average day. And so clearly there is a need not only to have very robust processing power, but as importantly, very secure systems, because you can imagine the malfeasance that would arise should people be able to penetrate some of their server systems. So they were able to take that server hardening time from 3 to 4 weeks to 3 to 4 minutes. And I'm just going to leave that statement out there for a second. A task that might have taken them 4 weeks, right? 28 days, 20 days, if you're thinking Monday through Friday, to a couple of minutes. And that's using automation templates, that's using pre-configured servers, where you're literally double-clicking a button. And because you're only paying for the server time that you're using, it actually reduced their economic burn as well. Online medical care scheduling. ZocDocs is certainly one of the more prevalent ones. And so they were able to go all in on AWS under 12 months, becoming the first HIPAA compliant cloud organization. And they were able to leverage what we'll talk about a little bit later as infrastructure as code to securely scale to 6 million patients a month. And they were able to use that data to reduce patient wait times from 24 days to 24 hours, all while maintaining that very compliant patient record data. Lastly, Vodafone, a very prominent player in the mobile phone market, 30 million users. And they had 2 frameworks. The one mentioned here, I'll highlight, is called PCI, Payment Card Industry, which is, if you think of credit card payments, that's the underlying infrastructure standard, which is PCI. And with the mobile phone infrastructure moving the way it is, mobile payments and being able to process credit card transactions over a phone is not only a space that has really taken off in the last couple of years, but certainly one that, again, potentially could be ripe for bad actors. And so using our existing frameworks, they were able to not only secure that platform, but reduce their capital expenses by 1/3. So like I said, that was the deck that kind of set the tone. Now, let's see. And hopefully by skipping, you can still see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So one program in particular, and there are a number of programs at AWS, is called ATO, or Authority to Operate. So in a lot of these privileged environments, a lot of these security heavy environments, you, out of the gate, you aren't allowed to simply connect your unsecure server to a DoD network, to a financial regulatory network. before you even get there, you have to have an authority to operate. So taking a step back, if you were building a startup that was selling, I don't know, you were selling a bike share type of platform, there's really no need for you to get a compliance. You simply set up your website and you're off to the races. Well, in these more regulated spaces, in these more data compliant workloads, compliance is part of the underlying framework. And so these are, again, some of those frameworks. We talked about PCI, which is payment card infrastructure. I'm not going to try and explain what all of these are. I mentioned FedRAMP is if you're doing any kind of work on the federal non-DoD side. DoD has its own accreditation program. There's also the criminal justice system, CJIS. HIPAA is for healthcare. And again, there are dozens more than this. This is just to sort of show some of our more prevalent, more in-demand offerings. And as I alluded to before, we have a number of technology partners, system integrators, consulting partners that can really help you on that path. Technology partners are those, the Ciscos, the Barracudas, the F5s. System integrators are the Accentures, the Deloittes, the Cognizants that also serve as consulting partners. And the reason I mention those is really to say you can certainly go it alone. We have customers all day that decide what they have is a bit unique and they just want to go it alone. But we do have technology partners that have the breadth and depth of expertise in these domains that can help you leverage your specific offering in a secure environment. So what is ATL? Well, the goal ultimately is to help customers, partners, independent solution vendors. So ISV, think of as you. You would be an independent solution or software vendor at the end of the day. And the goal is to really, as it says here, both accelerate the compliance process, reduce time and complexity. The average time for a FedRAMP certification is 18 to 24 months. Well, in the startup world, you can now start to understand, if you didn't already, why a lot of startups run away from the idea of building first on a government system. 24 months is beyond most startups' time horizon, so it simply doesn't make sense. So our goal is to drive that time to as small a number as we can get. And we've seen some really phenomenal cases where we've seen as little as 60 days to get what otherwise took 24 months. So we provide those reusable artifacts, guidance templates, tools to really make this as boilerplate as it can be. Certainly your specific solution will have unique configurations, but a lot of the templates are really around processes more than technologies. How are you soliciting information from a customer? What are you doing with that information? Are you asking for the most amount of information or the least amount of information to solve the challenge? Things like that, where they're not really technical challenges, it's more a process. And so figuring out early in your journey how to set those best practices up can really be a win as you progress. And again, along those same lines, making sure that your development, your security, that sort of continuous integration and delivery, all those strategies are around building and optimizing that continuous loop so that as you're building new technologies and tools, that you're not having to continuously go back to that framework document, that's just becoming part of your underlying strategy. And so the program tenets really are to leverage this idea of infrastructure as code. And what we mean by that is once that infrastructure has been secured and rendered compliant, just like you would make a library call within Python or Java or whatever other language you're using, you would similarly continuously reference that infrastructure that's already been hardened. And so certification optimizes that security process. It helps you achieve that standard that the industry recognizes, which provides that that validation. There are certain pieces that require continuous monitoring and testing, and we can talk about the service components that we have that enable that. And then ultimately, it helps you decide through informed decision making if you're, for example, a HIPAA compliant piece of technology. You've got a patient chatbot that you're building. Once you've built your HIPAA compliant framework, you've done a lot of heavy lifting where, if I go back a couple slides actually, some of these other there could be a scenario where you say, we've got a medical chatbot. We think that it could be very unique within, say, Department of Veterans Affairs under DoD. Well, because you've already got that HIPAA layer, you've already done a lot of heavy lifting. They're not the same framework, but a lot of the underlying security controls are similar. And I say that because, again, when you're thinking of your decision making and change, as you start to think of that sort of crawl, walk, run goal set, where are you? Where do you want to be over time? Figuring out what the accreditation milestones that you need to achieve can help inform future paths that you might want to consider. And part of that process is going back a step to the beginning, perhaps, I failed to really introduce a little bit more about myself. The team I'm on, the Worldwide Public Sector Venture Capital and Startups team, our goal, our mission in life is to drive success of public sector startups. And we define public sector as state, local, federal government, as health, as education, as nonprofit, and more as sustainability, smart cities, clean tech. And the reason I mention that is I am an Amazon employee, but my job is not to sell you AWS. My job is to make you successful in whatever that means. So the emphasis of this talk is to put the right tools into your toolbox. So whether that's a template for how to ensure accreditation and compliance, we have a whole host of trainings that are geared towards making sure you're building code that is compliant. We have a number of pre-built artifacts. While your solution, hopefully, is quite unique, it's safe to say that somebody somewhere has already built an artifact of similar back-end technology. So the front-end interface and the code, yes, it should be unique. That's your special startup. But if it's a, for example, EC2 instance running some flavor of Unix, it's safe to say that's already been done. So, we have those artifacts that you can leverage. We do have plenty of direct engagement. There's an entire ATO team whose job it is to help leverage those tools to drive your success even further. And lastly, visibility and marketing. So as you're continuing to grow and scale, we love to brag about the successes that have come. So we have a host of opportunities, whether it's through, we have events throughout the year. The big one that we have every fall is called AWS reInvent. and we have public sector summits and industry-specific chats all the time. And we love to get companies in a hopefully not that far away post-corona world. We love to get customers up on stage that can talk about their solutions. And so that's probably one of the more enjoyable parts of the job. I get to just sit in the background and watch these companies really grow. So really the goals are to have that verified compliance control solution. Verifiable is key because you're going to need certain artifacts that you're going to, you'll submit essentially a package, a working package of compliance controls to this HIPAA or FedRAMP inspector. And so really those outcomes are, as I mentioned, to accelerate that path to compliance, to reduce the number of non-compliant findings. You are, without a doubt, going to have some things that are not in compliance, but going through these compliance checklists, being able to drive that list down to zero as fast as possible. So here are two real-world examples. I always like to, anchor reality around these things. The Smartsheet was able to use a couple of our partners. They were able to leverage the tools, and they went from, so GovCloud is the government-specific cloud. So the way AWS is set up, we have regions throughout the world, and then within the United States, we have an East and West GovCloud region, which are specific to federal workloads. So Smartsheet was able to go from no web presence, didn't exist on GovCloud, to FedRAMP compliant in less than 90 days. So I will put a disclaimer and say their results are not to be representative of your own experience, but I think when you go in there eyes wide open, really engaging the partner solutions that are readily available, as well as tools that we've built to help you, we can really drive that through. And on the left, you see a number of sub-programs that we've built out specifically for FedRAMP, DoD, criminal justice, payments. HITRUST is the underlying HIPAA trust health compliance standard, and then IRS for federal system, payment systems. And so another one, in InnoVest Systems, they use one of our partners called Coalfire. So that was more of an advisory service. So again, startup, maybe a little less relevant, but they were able to basically build their entire FedRAMP platform from nothing to compliant in 6 months. And the reason I give these examples are to say these are different types of examples. One, it was a startup or smaller company that was leveraging tools and a partner relationship to get from their existing solution to GovCloud compliant or FedRAMP compliant in 90 days. And that's really the goal of this, right? If you're thinking of applying for various SBIRs, STTRs, various grants from industry and from government, oftentimes they do have a regulatory designator. If you're getting any type of DoD SBIR, you're going to, at some level in that journey, need to be compliant with whatever their underlying framework requirements are. And I say that because it can be challenging when you're looking at these opportunities as a startup, figuring out what's the path of least resistance, where do I see my beachhead market, and where do I see the opportunity to scale quickly. And so we've built these programs and built these frameworks so that you can certainly decide you don't want to operate in a DoD environment, but it shouldn't be the regulatory complexity that's the driving decision behind it. And again, some of those benefits we talked about is reduced effort to deploy the configurations. We have audit services, so it's just continuously logging. Certain compliance frameworks require it, but I think it's, as a general best practice, a good thing to have, so that as you're making changes, you can figure out, oh, this change actually put me out of compliance. You can build your end-to-end automation capabilities and collaborate with partners to really help deliver those solutions faster. This is a little bit hard to read the subtext, but at the high level, really, it's this sort of continuous loop where you think of resource provisioning, configuration management, monitoring, governance and compliance, and resource optimization. And you're really never done, right? It's this continuous loop that you'll live through throughout the life cycle of your company. And so going one step layer down into this sort of solution set that we can really help drive through. Within the resource provisioning, there's something called cloud formation. That I think it's really cool, where literally you can build an entire network where you could have a virtual private cloud, you could have database servers, and we have 175 services you could choose from, where you template that entire cloud infrastructure. And then if you decide we want to have, we're a Pittsburgh-based company and we want to go all in Singapore, we want to make that our next market. You can literally, and you want to have it in a local Asia Pacific region, not running out of Ohio. You can literally just template that and then double click, and then the entire thing can replicate. And with the particular set of accreditations, that can be really helpful, so that once you've gotten your hardened, configured footprint, you don't have to do that every time, so that you can kind of create this snapshot where you say, this is our approved configuration. And then again, using that in conjunction with some auditing tools, you can make sure that you're always in compliance. And down below, we talk about on the screen here is auto scaling. So auto scaling really is the concept that you can turn on, turn off services as needed. So say that for whatever reason, say that you're a financial planning tool where it's cyclical based on time of year. So at certain parts of the year, you need 100 servers, but other parts of the year, you need 10. So being able to turn on and turn off those services can really help you optimize your performance without overrunning your costs. And so this is an example of that templated infrastructure I was talking about. You can have and we don't have to talk about the underlying design here, but it's more the idea that once this infrastructure you see has been accredited, it's template, and then you can redeploy it, you can move it around the world, you can do whatever you need to do in a very quick and automated fashion. So now to configuration management. So first was more the infrastructure side. Now this is the underlying configurations, the software packages that run on those systems. Similarly, using system management, being able to sort of group common resources. So if you said you have a database group, so they're all using MySQL, so I can run one patch management tool against that common container, and then visually see if there were any challenges that arose from the patch, or they're all taken care of. And then CloudWatch enables you to, you can set critical service alerts, you can automate actions, and optimize for cost performance. So again, step one is the infrastructure, template that. Oops. Step two is securing that configuration. Step 3 is monitoring that, making sure that as things fall out of compliance, that you've got a plan of action. Step 4 is that governance and compliance. We have, I would say, 3 main compliance check tools. Amazon Mazie, where you can literally just template your configuration, and Mazie can check to make sure that it is industry standard compliant. Inspector and guard duty take action in those same arenas as well. And then one of the coolest ones I definitely wish I had had more insights into while I was a founder was trusted advisor at the bottom of the screen. Our goal here is to help you optimize your overall solution. And you see these 5 domains that we optimize for. Certainly when we're talking about compliance, there's the security optimization that we're looking for, but we don't stop there. We're looking at cost optimization. Are you using, the analogy would be, are you using your Lamborghini to go get groceries? If you've got a grossly over provisioned server where you're not even hitting 10% or 20% of CPU utilization at the peak, well, there's probably a way that we can move you into a smaller footprint to save some cost. Similarly, on performance, are you under or over optimized on that dimension? So these are all sort of part of that trusted advisor tool. And then service limits. So if you are figuring out based on size, cost, complexity, that you want to limit up or down the service levels, you can do that directly within. So hopefully that gives sort of a high level thought around accelerating those payloads. At the end of the day, I guess the thought that I'd like to leave with you is really around this doesn't have to be this onerous, go it alone, heavy lift. This is where I'll put in a plug for Carnegie Mellon. There are a lot of tools on and off campus that can really help you along that journey. And as they fall short, not as they fall short, as they look to external partners, we stand in the wing ready to help on some of those more challenging workloads.